All right. Well, okay. Well, we'll get started then. So tonight, everybody, first, welcome to the Flameless Fireside podcast. And today is November 3rd. I am one of your hosts, Celeste, and I'm here with John Brailsford and also Everett. And he had to step out, so he'll be joining us momentarily. And our guest tonight is Syra, and we're super excited to have her. She's just super spunky and fun, and we're totally thrilled to have her here. So, what we normally do, just for those who are new, who've not seen the show, there's kind of three sections. The first section, we will interview Syra and get to learn all about her and how amazing she is. And then the next section, we're going to discuss a topic that we have chosen for tonight, which is kind of like staying strong through adversity and using faith and hope to endure that. So we will discuss that. And then at the end, toward the end, anyone who has questions or comments for any of us on the panel are able to come on one by one and turn on your mic, turn on your video and interact with us and either say your comment or ask your question. And then at the end of the show, once videos are all off, we do have an after party and anyone's welcome to stay for that. And that's where everybody just kind of comes in, turns on all their mics and all their videos, and we just kind of hang out and just discuss whatever. And sometimes it's always a lively discussion. So anyway, okay, so let's get this party started. Welcome, Syra. We're super excited to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to start out with just a little bit about you. Why don't you give us a little bit of background information, like where you're from, family information, stuff like that.
Okay. Well, I was actually born in West Valley. So despite the fact that I live in Virginia, I was born in Utah.
Wow.
So I am technically a Utahn.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I was born in West Valley. I am one of 6 kids. I'm the second oldest. I have an older brother and 4 younger sisters. And I secretly think my dad was hoping for boys because he raised us like half mentally male. Seriously. And when I was 10 years old, I moved out to Virginia with my family. And it was a move my dad made for his career and to kind of help our family to grow and separate from my extended family, because all my extended family still lives out in Utah. And then I grew up here basically my developing years. And then when I was about 18 or 19, I think it was, I moved back to Utah, went to UCMT for massage therapy. And then I met my ex-husband and we got married, and we were married for 5 years. Unfortunately, we ended up getting divorced, and we moved back to Virginia for about a year. And then we went back to Utah because it made the, believe it or not, made the divorce process simpler. So yeah. And so I moved back to Utah, and then I kind of did this ping pong thing back and forth between Utah and Virginia until I went through my divorce. And I have been here for the last 14 years. So I guess this is the longest I've been in any one place ever.
And do you like it?
I do. It's very beautiful. It's all trees. It's one big forest. So if you're claustrophobic, it might like get to you, and it does have humidity. That's one of the downsides, but it is absolutely beautiful in the spring and the fall.
That's what
And yeah, you'll get snow every once in a while, but it's I don't know. I think it's absolutely fabulous because the temperatures, except for in the middle of the winter, the very middle and the very middle of the summer, it's extreme. It's kind of
So you
miserable.
get very distinct seasons there, though,
Yeah.
don't you?
Well, we get a little bit more warmth than you guys do in Utah. So our summers will last longer and our falls will last longer. But once it hits like that month and a half, where in the middle of winter, it'll get pretty cold and the cold goes right to your bones. And then the summertime, it's hot and humid, and it is kind of miserable for about a month and a half. And yeah, but outside that, it's fabulous.
Well, cool. Well, I actually live in Texas and Dallas, so it's kind of humid here too. It's kind of hot. I don't know. I don't think John really has to deal with humidity. Do you?
I think that happens
Um,
when you're,
No, although trivia, Cache Valley is the wettest place in Utah.
Oh,
But Utah is the third driest state. So I don't know if saying that much. So,
I think you
but it
tend to
is
get the
very cold.
humidity when you're close to coasts, I think.
Yeah, I think coasts kind of even it out a little bit. So, and I am not near a coast. I'm near the coast of Bear Lake.
You are near. Yeah, I was
There
going to
you
say like,
go.
Great Salt
Give
Lake
it to you.
And the Great Salt Lake as well.
Which is not so great anymore. I was there
Yeah.
last time. I'm like, where's the lake? I think it's gone.
Right. Well, and they're not helping with evening out the temperature at all. So
Not at all.
I need an ocean. So
All right. Okay. So Syra, were you is your family members like or
Yes.
converts? Like what's the storyline with that?
I grew up in the church. I was born in Utah, so it's kind of like, yeah. And both sides of my parents' families were all members of the church and everything. So I'm a lifer, I guess you call it. And yeah, and I've raised my kids obviously active. My ex-husband unfortunately disappeared 14 years ago, and we don't know where he is. And so it's been just me for my two kids with external help. I've had a lot of support and stuff from family and other close family members. And so yeah, I have two kids. I have a 17-year-old boy, 17 and a half. He turns 18 in February, which is wigging me out.
Yeah.
And then my daughter is 14 going on 21. Or at least she thinks so.
right.
That's yes.
Yeah.
We all have one of those.
I've had a kid or two like that too.
How about 4 of them? I've got 4 of them.
So the advantage after the divorce, the disadvantage is you don't have that connection for your kids with their dad. You're not getting any support from that side of the family. But the upside is you really can be the driving force behind kind of guiding them and raising them in the church. And luckily, I mean, you and I have talked that, I know you have a very supportive family. Mm-hmm. And so that's probably helped you through a lot of that stuff. So
it really has. And actually, there are a couple members of my ex's family that have been, I wouldn't say supportive, but they've been communicating. Like, and
okay,
really that's better than not communicating. So yeah, there's been good parts, and whereas it's been difficult because I've never gotten anything. Like, I get jealous when I hear women who get child support and alimony and stuff. I'm like, I never got any of that, right. But I feel like in some ways it's been a small price to pay because he's unfortunately making some poor choices. And I haven't ever gone after him because I believe that he is a good man who has just made some really, really poor choices in his life.
Kind of got troubled at some point, somehow.
Yep.
So when you say he disappeared, like I was thinking like literally like you had no clue where he went. So we
really don't know where he is.
Oh, you really don't know? Oh. Okay.
No, not technically. So I've heard through the grapevine through different family members most of them are trying to stay neutral because they're trying to do the same thing with, helping to be there for hoping that he'll, want to fix his life and stuff like that. And so I haven't pursued anything because I have my own hope for that as well, just for his sake, because I still care about what happens to him. But he did disappear on us when I had full custody of my kids, and I went for full physical and legal custody so that I wouldn't have to worry about, the fighting and stuff like that. And I had them full time anyway, and we were in different states and everything. And so after that, that's when I think and because he didn't show up for court, he decided that, or the judge said no visitation. So I think he figured that, well, I've lost my kids, and he stopped trying, and we haven't heard from him since. So.
Well, that's a sad story.
And I think
it's awesome that you have compassion for him, despite probably the anger and the issues that you've had to deal with due to his choices. And I do, as being a child that was raised without a dad, because my mom was married twice and both just kind of opted not to be in my life. It's hard on kids. So like, it was hard on me. It was hard on all my siblings. How do you help cope? How do you help your kids cope with that aspect of their life? Obviously, it sounds like you have family around you that's helpful and supportive, but how do you manage that for them?
Honestly, I think that Well, my daughter doesn't know any different. She doesn't even know her father. So he had her like twice when she was a baby. And my son was 4 when he left. So he does remember him, and he deals with a bit of anger. But I've constantly told my kids that very statement, that he is a good man. He's not a horrible person. He has a very, very bad temper. And and that leads him to making some pretty unreliable choices and stuff like that.
Right.
And then I just tell them, I was like, because of those choices, that he has lost us. He's lost the ability to be with us. And it's his own choices that are doing this. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. And with my daughter, she's like, cool, she's she's like, whatever, I don't know any different, I don't know him. But my son, unfortunately, has struggled over the years, because in the beginning, he used to make statements like, I miss his face, I miss his voice, because he was a terrible husband, but he was, well, I won't say terrible all the time. When he lost his temper, he was a terrible husband, but he was an incredible dad. And he and Joey had this bond that I couldn't even touch, and so it really broke my heart. So he had to deal with some counseling and different things over the years, and even now he still has a tough time holding on to some anger, more so not because of what he did to him, but because he hurt mom,
Right.
and he's very, very protective.
That's great. You got your little person there protecting your heart. So that's awesome. So so I'm curious, because for me, growing up without a dad, I didn't know my second dad, or my biological father, at all, because my mom separated when I was like 9 months. So like I don't remember him. But I remember when he came back, I was 23, and he kind of came back into my life. And my mom was always kind about him, even though it sounds like now that I'm older, the storyline was questionable. But she was
Yeah.
always kind about him. She's like, he had struggles. It's not that he didn't love you, positive things toward me as a kid, because it wasn't my fault that he had made those choices. And I think she recognized that if she was to be like, oh, he's a loser and he did this and he did that, like, that actually is just going to hurt me. It's not really, it's not doing anything for him. So
And look how
I'm
amazing
grateful.
you are now. I mean, it gives me hope, because it makes me feel like that I wasn't able to give my kids a dad, and I had a great dad. I had an incredible dad. So it breaks my heart. But when I hear about that, it makes me feel better. Like, yeah, that was the right choice and I call it being real. I don't sugarcoat things for my children, because I feel like it allows them to step up and take a more mature mentality towards it, and to be a stronger person, and to grow, because they're smart.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. It was tough for me. I've had tough moments, but I think just the outlook given to me, even as a child, even if she was sugarcoating things and kind of twisting it for my benefit, um, it did help me. I mean, I had to come, when I was an adult, I had to come to grips with the reality of the situation, and I had to get some counseling for that. But I'm really impressed by mothers who can suppress their own anger and frustration and wanting to say whatever it is about their ex-husbands. But they don't, because they recognize, my kids need to have that positive outlook. So I commend you for that. I think it's awesome. I'm thankful my mom did that as well. So what do you think, John? Is that a good route to
Yeah,
take?
I used to, whenever I dealt with divorce as a therapist, my ex, the mother of my kids, we really never had that bad mouthing issue. I think both of us spoke well. If we mentioned, what was hard for us in the marriage, it would be just very basic and simple. And, she was kind of distant, or I was, kind of hyperactive, or, whatever it was, but we were generally like, but she loves you very much, and she's a great mom. And, and we had our good times too. Like, your mom and dad really loved each other, and we still care about each other, even though we're gone, or not in the relationship anymore. I tell people, and I, even with adopted kids, I don't know. There's just something when you look at your life, and it's and obviously with biological kids, when you look in the mirror, I mean, you see both of your parents in your face, and I don't know. There's just something about when you feel like those two parents are at war with each other. It really creates a divide within each child, where it's kind of like I'm at war with myself. And I've seen that now. I work more with kids in my new position. And I see that the kids, most of my clients are autism spectrum kids. So they're going to be super sensitive to emotional stuff going on. And boy, when those parents are at war, I mean, they are just bouncing off the walls. It is just so hard for them to regulate. And it's still hard because of their diagnosis, even when the parents are doing well together, but it's really a huge difference, and you'll usually see those kids with parents who are peaceful. They're getting out of here like 2 or 3 months faster. They're healing quicker. They're learning skills faster. They're doing better in school, and so it definitely has an impact, so.
I'm constantly talking my son out of being angry at his father, and even just being angry at even my ex-boyfriend, the most serious relationship I've had. I'm like, because I want to teach him that the anger that he's feeling, whereas it's justified, he's valid for feeling it. I don't want to discredit what he's feeling, but I keep trying to remind him, like, you got to work on trying to work through that and heal from it, because it's not hurting him as much as it's hurting you. You're the one that's going to be held back. And that's the number one thing I don't want for my kids. I didn't divorce my ex-husband because I didn't love him. In fact, that's what made it hell for me, was that I did love him so very much, but he was hurting me constantly because of his temper, and so I was just like, I know this is not healthy, and I'm not going to end up in a good place if this continues. And I have 2 children, at the time, 1 child, because we actually got pregnant with my daughter while we were separated. So yeah, if divorce isn't hard enough, try throwing pregnancy on top of it while you go through it.
Wow. That does add a little bit of a twist to it, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh.
Challenging.
Oh, and not only that, but I actually ended up, it's crazy. I could write a book. I ended up at that time that I had gotten laid off from my job when I was like 6 months pregnant, and nobody will hire a pregnant woman about to have a baby. So I looked and looked and looked. I was out there by myself. My support was out here. And so I looked everywhere. I finally found this job making like $5 an hour, like some peon job, and answering phones. And the first night of training, my water broke. And it was 7 weeks early. And then my roommate decided that she didn't want to renew my lease for some odd reason. And so I actually ended up in the hospital. I was jobless, homeless, in the NICU, but divorced by myself with a preemie and a 4-year-old. So, yeah.
And your dog died. No, I'm just kidding.
No, this
and my truck broke down.
Oh my God. When did the cancer, because I know, when did the health issues start showing up in relation to that? Was it not long after that, or?
Well, there was a lot of trauma that I dealt with, obviously after the divorce that I had to heal from it. And there was also a couple incidents in Utah where I was attacked. And so I was so damaged at that point that I was just like, it's time to go home. The Lord said, it's time to go home. I came back to Virginia, and I spent a good like 6 or 7 years just healing, and I've been divorced for 14. So yeah, I'm one of the ones that's like way up there.
I was going to say, when you were doing your list of things that you were doing there without any support, with just chaos going on in your life, you know what that tells me? Like, to me, that just tells me how strong you are. Like, even when you talk about it, I mean, I'm sure it was horribly difficult and devastating. And maybe there were moments where you thought, I can't even do this. Right. But The
all the
fact that
time.
there's something within you that the Lord allowed all that to happen because he knew you had that strength and he knew you'd have that fight to be able to push through. I just think that says so much about who you are as a person, as a mother. I mean, I can only imagine. I've had twins in the NICU but I had a home and I had a spouse at the time. And, like there was other stability going on. I can't imagine all that with
Well,
all the
it's kind
challenges.
of what I can't tell you if I had a penny even for how many times I've heard that. But the thing is that you'd be amazed at how strong you can be when you have to be.
Exactly.
I had a brand new baby and a 4-year-old that depended on me. I was ready to do whatever I had to do, which included standing on a corner and begging for money.
Yeah.
I mean, I have gotten to several points in my life where I was at that point, like I do whatever I have to do to take care of my babies. And then I guess the other part of it is just, I think it's more of stubbornness. I think I'm super stubborn it's in a good way, but I'm just like, I refuse to believe that these are just these horrible events that happen to me. I want to make them value. I know this is going to sound really, really bizarre, but I put value in things, even the attacks. They were brutal, they were traumatizing, but I'm like, if I can pull something out of it that makes it vulnerable or valuable, then I have just turned something that was horrible that just happened to me and I put the control back in my court.
That's what I love. I love
I'm stubborn.
thought. Yes, I love the thought of taking back the control. Like that for me personally is a huge, like, I remember when that moment hit me in the head, like I'm giving them the control, whoever, if I'm mad at someone, or if I can't forgive someone, if whatever, like they have the control over my emotions for the most part, even though it is really my reaction, but them, the scenario for whatever reason is controlling me. And so I love the fact that you brought out control, because sometimes people view control as a bad thing, but in those moments when you're able to say, you know what, I was an innocent party in this attack. I wasn't doing anything that would cause me to have this happen to me. So they took all the control, but you know what? I'm going to learn something from this. I'm going to gain something from this, and I'm going to take back the control and say, yes, you did this to me, but I am going to benefit in some way from that choice. And I think that ability is difficult to get to. I know it took me a long time to even have that aha moment to where it was like, oh, it is about control. And so I do have that frequently in my mind. Don't let that other person take the control.
And it's very hard to get out of that victim mentality because, it is hard for, it's hard to, when the damage is being done, it's hard to step back and go, okay, you know what? I've got to pull myself together enough to look at this from a wider, I got to pull myself out of this. And that's not easy to do when you're in the middle of pain. I know it took me a long time to do that. And I spent a lot of years being very damaged, and I told you, Celeste, before we turned this on, I said that I believe that if you're going to do any good to anybody, I believe that being vulnerable is extremely valuable. And so I even got to a point where I attempted suicide when I lived up in Minnesota. I waited for a missionary on his mission. I went on my mission and we were supposed to get back at the same time. And because of health problems, I had to come home early. And then he came home and I was so excited and everything. And then he called me up, said, I can't fight the feeling, this isn't right, ripped my heart out. And I never heard from him again.
Oh, I'm so
sorry.
like,
it's just like, it's really difficult to try and keep that positive attitude. But I think the only way, and this is why I guess, I think it's so important to focus on faith and hope. And that's why I wanted to do this, because my desire tonight is for us to talk about ways that we can use faith to create hope. Because hope is something I still struggle with.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I know we throw that word around really easily, but to gain it and to utilize it is so difficult. But just two quick things before we move into the topic. So where did you serve your mission? Just quickly give us a little bit of information on that.
I went to Rochester, New York. So I was in the Palmyra area. and I got to do the historical site tours. So I was a site sister, and that was amazing.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I don't think I'm even being biased when I say that it was the best mission. My backyard was a sacred grove.
No doubt. That was
Yeah.
my favorite vacation ever, was my church history tour or trip. It was
Yeah.
amazing. I loved it. That
Are you guys
That's
picking
awesome.
up my volume at all enough?
No, you sound good.
Yeah, I can
Okay.
totally hear you.
Yeah, you
Okay.
sound good. Okay, so secondly, real quick. So I know you said, and this is kind of a behind the scenes thing that we love about Syra. So she's really good at massages. So you so
Oh,
I've
yes.
gotten a
that you went to
reputation.
massage school, but what is it you do for a living now?
Right now I am surviving and still battling cancer.
That's
Not
right.
cancer itself, but the process. What's interesting is that even after the cancer is gone, the battle still goes on. So that is my job, that and to be a mom. Before that, though, I have done so many different things in my life, and I think it's all been towards my education. So I've done photography. I've done, I did financial services. I work with a company with financial services. I do massage therapy for friends and family on the side because unfortunately I wasn't able to I got all the education, but no certificate. We had that conversation.
Yes, we have.
Yeah. They wouldn't even missed the deadline. Anyway, and then I feel like there was something else that I had done before that. The biggest ones were photography and the financial services. So
Well,
yeah.
awesome.
And I went to school for a really long time.
Well, for anyone out there that wants to know, she gives amazing massages in general. So, hey.
Yeah, I have experienced that for myself.
Good
So,
times.
I know how to put somebody into a coma. Yes.
Yes, and it's
yes.
amazing. All right. Well, let's go ahead and just shift into our topic now. So, John has already mentioned, so you are a cancer survivor. You're still dealing with it now, making progress. That is recent, a couple years, right? When you were diagnosed a couple years ago, is that correct?
Yes, it
Can
was
you give us a little
October of
back-
2019.
Okay, go ahead and give us a little, catch us up from October
Okay.
2019 to where we are.
So I actually was, I remember I got breast cancer. So I actually found a lump. I was just going like this, rubbing, scratching myself or something. And then I felt the lump and I was like, whoa, what is this? And I asked a couple of people, family members, sisters to check it for me and stuff, just to make sure it wasn't in my head and everything. I was pretty sure, but I went and I had an ultrasound, and there's a really cool story I'll share a little bit with that one. That was amazing. But and so I found out that I did have I had not only a lump, but I also had calcium deposits, which had the cancer in them, and it was also in my lymph nodes. And then I also tested positive. I'm going to give you guys a little education here. It's I was tested, or I was what's called triple positive, which means I tested positive both female hormones and a protein called HER2. Okay, and all three of those, unfortunately, are what made my cancer extremely aggressive. So I had grade 3, which is the most aggressive kind of cancer, and then, but the amazing thing was I only had it in the one side. I was completely clear on the other side.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I went through the whole 9 yards. 2020 was torture for a whole different level. I went through chemo, which actually there was 6 treatments, and I was taking 2 chemo drugs and 2 other treatment drugs that were targeting those things. And the interesting thing, well, I'll catch you up and go into details later. So I went through chemo and I was supposed to have 6 treatments. I did 4 out of the 6 treatments because it started to take my ability to walk.
Oh.
I actually ended up in a motor chair because I couldn't walk at all for about 6 months. I even had a handicap pass and everything. I was thinking I would never be able to walk again. And that was really devastating, although the parking was pretty nice.
There's you looking at the good side. I'm going to find something that's positive here.
I love walking, but there's this little part of me that would love to go around in one of those chairs. I got to admit, but I'll take the walking, I guess. So
it was a definite benefit. I didn't have as far to walk, and my mom's handicapped, so she's in a motor chair. So we would have these motor chair races all the time, because
nice.
only hers was much newer, so she'd always kick my trash.
Always beating you.
Always, awesome. Yeah. So
my
anyway,
only experience was when I was pregnant with twins, and when I go to Walmart or Target, I'm like, I am so using one of these chairs. Around. I was so miserable. But go ahead. I totally digress on that. Go ahead, Syra.
Oh, that's okay. So I ended up only doing 4 out of the 6 treatments, though. They were pretty intense treatments because it did start taking my ability to walk. And so by the time I hit my 4th one, I was in there for my 5th one. My oncologist said, why are you in a motor chair, Syra? And I was like, I can't walk. And she says, okay, since your recent scans came back clear and stuff, she says, I'm going to end your treatments early because I feel like the risks are outweighing the benefits. And that was a really huge relief for me. So I actually only had 4 treatments, and that it was so targeted, it was able to eradicate the cancer pretty quickly, even though it was extremely aggressive. So, and then when I went through that, I also then moved on. I got radiation. So I got 25 treatments of radiation. I got burned and blistered, and it was very, very painful. That lasted 2.5 months, maybe almost 3. And after radiation, let's see, I'm trying to get these in order. I had the mastectomy after my radiation, I think. No, I had it before, because they didn't want to, they're basically wanting to radiate any remaining tissue that might have microscopic disease. So right. I don't want to get too lost in all the details. You guys will fall asleep, but yeah, so they did the radiation afterwards. And unfortunately, the radiation caused a severe reaction in my tissue, especially in my chest muscle, caused an infection that spread throughout my entire left side. Oh, I ended up in the hospital with a temperature, and my oncologist was telling me, go to the ER. And when he tells you that, you're scared out of your mind. You're like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? And so they ended up having to remove the expander, and we had to adjust our plans for everything. And so it was extremely devastating to me, because my path, that was a little bit simpler for reconstruction stuff, and all I wanted more than anything was just to feel like me again. Because the problem, cancer does it, but the problem with breast cancer, especially for women, because men can get it too, believe it or not. Yeah. But the thing about breast cancer for women is that it literally tries to strip you of everything that makes you feel like a woman. And it has very much tried to do that for me. It takes your hair, it takes your eyebrows, it takes your eyelashes, it takes your breast, it takes your strength, your, everything. And you get what's called chemo brain. It's legit, like seriously, fries your brain. It's worse than baby brain.
We've noticed that. My sister had Hodgkin's and had 2 stem cell transplants, which that's all you can do. And that chemo brain, I don't know if I'll ever meet her again, to be honest, in this life. She's just been so different. Plus the stem cell transplant from another person, there's almost like this DNA personality shift.
Oh, really?
Almost like she shares similarities with the donor, kind of thing, so it's really been interesting.
I've heard that.
I have never. That's very intriguing. It makes sense, but who knew?
So she had, I think, 24 people that matched her, and I thought to myself, if you had that many people, I would almost want to go interview them and make sure that whoever I get the DNA from is sane.
I know you,
like
Matt. If you're going to
That's
save me, but hey, I want to interview you.
I want this really chill woman that's like really kind, and it's just like, but there's this other one that does crazy stuff, and I don't want to get in trouble, that kind of thing. So
well, I think the stuff I've heard anyway is more like memories and urges and strange tastes.
no, it's just tendencies. Yeah, it's like
that's funny.
But once you get the ball rolling on crazy,
it snowballs.
It can be hard to stop it. So
yeah,
I know that from personal experience too.
So one of the biggest parts, though, and I feel like I want to bring this up because it was a huge part, and I have to give this credit to him, is that outside of obviously my family and my friend Rob, who's been supportive and everything, I have my ex-boyfriend. I met him literally the week before I was diagnosed. And then found out that his mother passed away from breast cancer. And so I was like, oh my gosh, you have an out. I totally get it. This is not okay for you. And he's like, I'm not going to go anywhere. And so he was a huge part of, especially the first 6 months. The first 6 months were the hardest, and he was there for so much of it. And he was my strength. He was just that person that was the comfort. But I do have to also say, I was constantly asking for prayers on Facebook, on other places. And I could always tell when people were praying for me, because while my body was being destroyed and falling apart, and my taste buds were going out of whack from chemo. Oh my gosh, water was horrible.
Oh no.
It was awful. I could not. Ugh. And and I gained off the 35 pounds that I had worked so hard to get off and stuff. And so anyway, it was just like, I could always tell when people were praying for me, because while my body was falling apart, inside, spiritually and mentally, I probably felt stronger during that time than I felt my entire life. So like those prayers, they really, really do work. I had a lot of people praying for me constantly, and that really, really helps. And I guess that's one of the things that helps with this is reaching out and asking for those.
Right. And I've actually heard other people say that they can literally feel when people are out there praying for them. And I mean, for us, when we see those prayer requests pop up on Facebook or whatever, I mean, we know it's to a mass group, and it's kind of like, well, does my prayer really even matter? I mean, she's asking thousands of people, but I agree. I think that it does. I think when all those people come together and pray, like there's just such a strength in that. So I love hearing people testify of that, because
I just imagine, all these people, because I know what I do. I just stop everything I'm doing and I just say a little prayer for that person. I won't hit done or, already done, whatever, until I really want to have that conversation, and it may be short or whatever, but I multiply that by, hundreds of people, sometimes thousands, depending on how many friends you have. Yeah. It's like, there's a ripple effect,
Yeah.
And I felt an amazing support as I reached out. And that was the biggest reason I felt that, was because I reached out so much. But I also realized that there were so many people that loved me so much. And I know it's cancer. There's a lot of it that comes with cancer. Whenever people hear the word cancer, they're like, oh my gosh. And they give extra, and they pray harder and stuff like this. But it also reminded me that this was a critical part of surviving it. At least in my opinion, I felt like I knew that I was going to make it, and there was actually a point in time that, the cool story, when you're ready, I was going to tell you, where I knew I wasn't going to die.
Well, you can share that with us when
okay.
you want to. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wait, hold on just a second. Okay, go ahead.
What was that? We'll say a little prayer.
So John being John.
Please help me take this story in. No, go ahead.
I'm actually, tell me if this is different.
There's no time like the present.
What is that?
No, you sound great.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Are you
now we hear.
asking? Oh, I think I don't know what y'all are talking about. I don't know.
So when I first found, I obviously had to go to an OBGYN to get checked out. And I went into the office, and I don't know where this guy got his degree or whatever, but he, he gave me the exam. And you remember I said that I had like 4 people check just to make sure it wasn't in my head, you know? And so he checked me, and he's like, I don't feel anything. He tried saying I had lumpy breasts. And I was like,
No.
first of all, I don't have lumpy breasts, you know? Second thought I was, are you a doctor? You know, but he was like, but I do feel something in the lymph nodes, you know, because you got lymph nodes right here underneath the arm. And he's like, I do feel something there. So I am going to go ahead and order you a mammogram. And I was like, whatever, whatever it takes. Right. And so I left the building, or I left the office. It was in one of those big office buildings. And I walked out the door into the hallway, and the spirit, I could not believe how strong it was. He stopped me in my tracks and said, call now and schedule before you leave the building. Like, I remember thinking it was so prominent that I do it before I leave the building.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, when the spirit tells you something that strongly, you just don't argue, right?
Right.
So I called them up on the order, and I was like, hey, I need to schedule this. And they said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you have a lump? And you'll have to excuse me. I have to shift because my legs hurt.
No, you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, yes, I have a lump, just by what the doctor is saying. I do have a lump. And they said, okay, well, then you need to go back, and you need to make sure that on your order it says DIAG for diagnostic, and that it also says UL for ultrasound. Because if you have a lump, we need to be able to look further at it. We need to be able to diagnose it, right? And so I says, okay, well, it doesn't say that on there. So he says, okay, go back and get it. So I go back in there. I'm kind of annoyed because it's like, I told the guy that I had a lump. He gives me a routine mammogram instead of what I needed. So I go back in, and I'm like, I need this. And they hee-hawed and stuff like that, and rolled their eyes at me. But they came back, gave me the order. And so I was like, okay, good. And I walked out the door. Once again, the spirit stopped me and said, call now before you leave. And so I was like, okay. So I called them up, and I'm like, and they said, do you have DIAG on there? It's like, yes, I do. And it says, now check and see if it says UL somewhere on there, because we need that. And I says, no, it doesn't.
Oh gosh.
And I was so angry. And so I went back in there, and the doctor happened to be walking through the reception room. And so I stuck I don't get angry very often, but I stuck the order back up in his face, and I was like, you forgot the UL, the ultrasound. And so he took it back, and they were all pissed off at me at this point.
Sure.
I didn't care. I was like, this is my life we're talking about, right? And so they didn't even give the order back to me. They had it faxed directly in there.
Well, what did they say? What did they say when you got the results?
Well, I actually have not gone back yet to them, which I have been feeling like I need to go back and, like, I don't know, talk to a supervisor or something.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, go back to help other women that they'll.
Yeah, well, that's kind of that's the responsibility. I feel like I need to go back and yeah. So I was kind of nervous that they didn't give it back to me, but as soon as I walked out the door, the feeling was gone. The spirit was like, you're good. And that's what I needed. And then get this is the best part. And this is when I found out that I was going to live. I found out that I not only had the lump, like I said, I had the cancer in my calcium deposits throughout the breast and in my lymph nodes. The next step from the lymph nodes is your lymphatic system. And guess what happens when it gets in the lymphatic system? It metastasizes. I had a grade 3, the most aggressive kind of cancer. If I had waited even 2 weeks to get another appointment to get the right kind of order, who knows?
Okay, you've given me chills like 3 times with that story. Like every time you say it, I'm like chills over my body. It's amazing.
It was such a testimony to me, and it gave me a lot of strength. And I think that that's why it's so important to honestly keep reaching up, because that's why faith is so critical, is it makes these trials, and mine was cancer, but this is true for anybody. When you're going through something tough, you reach out, because that is how you can not only have a better picture and a better attitude, but you can actually possibly step back and go, you know what? I can possibly see the other side. I've been through this enough times that I know I'm going to be fine. And that gives me hope. And that's where the faith and the hope comes in.
That's awesome. Well, and your story matters too, and
Yep.
I mean, just your story combined with Men Can Get It Too. I have done a complete breast exam on myself during the show
Good.
thus far.
Good.
And I am happy to announce to everyone
While
that
we're doing this,
I am lump free.
That's awesome.
Other than just pectoral muscles, these big lumps, but
Oh, those
other than that-
ginormous lumps. Yeah. Oh, those are.
no, I didn't say they were huge. They're just, they're just nice and
we had an
average.
argument over whether or not that was true or not, because I was like, men don't have breast tissue. How can they get cancer in your
No, they do have breast tissue.
And they do.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I have been educated.
Yes. I wouldn't mind losing just a little bit of my breast tissue. Men don't want breast tissue. You know what I mean?
How about you give me yours? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So to go back to this whole thing about that doctor who sounds like a complete idiot.
Yes.
And I believe John's right. And I know people in the chat are agreeing with this as well. Even if you don't go back and confront face to face, I do think you need to share your story with them. Remind them of what happened, even if it's in a letter, an email, some way, because John's correct. Like if they look at the fact that they overlooked that multiple times, and that what that could have, if you wouldn't have been persistent, what could have happened. I mean, they have to kind of take a step back and consider their procedures. At least that's my opinion. You would hope that they'd be humble enough to be like, okay, this situation, we didn't recognize the severity and we need to make sure that doesn't happen again. So, I mean, I would encourage you to at least send an email, just explaining. It doesn't have to
I'm
be
definitely going to.
anything, but just saying, hey, this is what happened. This is what I felt I had to do. And this is what the outcome has been, just so you know. So I don't know.
And honestly, because of what John said, is like to protect other women. Because if he's being that nonchalant about an exam or even the possibility, I mean, if a woman walks in there, she says, I feel this, he feels something else. What is going to hurt anybody to give them what they need?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's
and I would take it a step further and I would say, I mean, how many women have gone through there just since you did? And even if there were one woman and you knew that because they kept doing it the wrong way, lost her life. I mean, that's devastating.
That guilt actually plagues me constantly.
Oh, I hope that doesn't.
And to me, it's a simple, literally just tell the story you just did in email form and send it to them. And I would just let them know if this isn't addressed in your practice, this email doesn't have to just be between you and me. I can share it in other places. A
little bit of a threat in there.
Well, just let them know I want to see change. I want to know. I want you to respond and let me know what changes you're willing to make.
Be honest.
I know.
Yeah.
I think
if you're not going to listen to me, somebody will.
That's right.
The thing is, if they do an email trail and they tell you here are the changes we've made since then or that we're making, that's something you can hold them to. And then if they don't, that just adds to their liability if a woman loses her life because of them. And they know that. It's sad that in a litigious society we have to go there sometimes, but people are just, it's bottom line or nothing, and we, it's like we forget to care. Like, why did he even get into medicine if there's not that going the extra mile? I do know that it's almost like these days insurance companies will even sort of punish doctors for ordering too many tests and stuff like that. And so some of it's built into the system. But I'll tell you what, that would I deal with mental health. But if I had an email sent to me like that and I knew that I had not done best practices, I tell you one thing, that I would definitely ramp that up.
Yeah, I think as long as your message is received with humility on their side, it could change the way to do things, and it could help people down the road. But I also think that you sharing your story helps. I think it's important to let women know that, or anybody in any type of situation where they don't feel 100% comfortable with their doctor's diagnosis, is to get a second opinion. If you have time, get a second opinion. I mean, if the spirit's telling you go back in again and again and again, you do that instead. But if not,
Yeah.
make sure you get a second opinion, because we don't have to just settle for what one doctor.
I mean, do they have like
Because they're
Yelp?
imperfect, right? They might make a mistake. So
Do they have like medical Yelp? Like
Yeah.
where you rate a doctor, and then tell your story on like a forum. I mean, I think that would be
anything, it gives people, I think it'll give the women the strength to feel like they can advocate for themselves. Because
right.
by nature, if the spirit had been prompting me, I might have kept my mouth shut, because I am actually a non-confrontational person. I hate contention and all that sort of stuff. So I might have kept my mouth shut if the spirit hadn't prompted me to do that.
Right.
And
Well, and so there's an example of the faith and hope situation. I've always had this thing with faith, hope, and charity. I've been fascinated by that. To me, whenever the scripture uses three words combined, you got to really pay attention, because there's something about, and there's even a progression to it. I always thought of faith as a belief when there's no evidence other than a spiritual prompting. And hope to me is when the evidence starts to be seen.
yeah.
Meaning that's almost like God's response to you is you have proven faithful. You've believed in me in the dark. I'm going to show you a little light, and that will give you hope. Charity to me is the quality of people who know. Like they don't need faith anymore. They just know. And when you know, what is the product of that? You love like Christ loves.
It's interesting that you say that, because when I look backwards, there was a lot of frustration over the years, because I felt very stuck out here. And you guys, those of you who know me know I'm a very free spirit. I like to be all over the place, right? And so to feel like I literally felt like the Lord he helped bless me to have a home that my family bought. Okay, it's in my brother's name. My parents put a down payment on the house. And my sister was helping to support financially. I mean, and their reason was so that I would never have to worry about being homeless. This was before cancer. And so that was a huge blessing, but I didn't realize until I got cancer that was their prompting to prepare for this. And even before that, I went through like a year where I don't know what drove me, but I was like focused, like almost obsessed with refining communication with the Holy Ghost, because I just felt really strongly about it, and I wanted to refine it. I wanted to hear him better. I wanted to know the difference between certain promptings, which all these things, when I look back, I'm like going, oh my gosh, he was preparing me for this trial for years before I ever got it, because he knew what I was going to be facing.
It's almost like the trial was a chance for you to practice all the things he taught you.
Yes. And the thing that I guess is the pull away that I'm hoping to share with other people is that when you can look at look for patterns, because I grabbed my journal and I was jotted down a bunch of thoughts and stuff that, just in case I wanted to share it. And one of them is like, look for patterns in your life, because those patterns, you can take comfort in them, even when you don't understand them. They're often the Lord working behind the lines to help guide us. And just knowing that can give us the hope that we are so desperately looking for, especially as single adults. I mean, we are all, no matter what we're dealing with, whether it's cancer or divorce or miscarriage or health problem, it doesn't matter. And I hate it. I don't hate it, I guess. It bothers me when people say, oh, but what I'm dealing with is nothing compared to what you deal with. Yes, what I dealt with was pretty awful. And I've dealt with a lot of pretty awful things in my life. But you know what? Everything is so relative. It's so subjective and personal to you. You can't compare these challenges, but the applications that the Lord gives us is the same.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm so glad you said that. I hope everybody watching will pay attention to that, because I mean, think about what the prophets have said recently. You got to get close to the Holy Spirit.
Cannot survive the last day without the Spirit.
Right.
Exactly.
Meaning that, and
Yes.
there will come things that are both worldwide and affecting everyone, but will affect you personally in a way that's unique to each person as well. And it will be so challenging that if you do not have that guidance, you'll literally walk out of your own doctor's office and end up, you know, succumbing to the thing that you could have overcome if you had been able to hear that. Right. You know, meaning God wants to speak to you, but for him to do that, he can't yell it in your ear. Like there has to be sort of a submissiveness and a listening ear, you know, like he that hath ears to hear, let him hear, you know. And that's what I love about it, is part of your preparation was, can I really hear that Spirit? And so when you did, I mean, think about it, you go back 3 times, you know, to like get the order right.
I'm like, yes, sir, turn around.
I know. I think that's fabulous. I mean, how many people would be like, what if this isn't the Spirit and I'm looking like an idiot, right? You know what I'm saying? So the fact that you were in tune and that you're willing to follow, because sometimes we just do what the Spirit says and we're like, all right, here I go. I'm not really understanding this, but I'll do it. The more that we're humble and the more we're willing to submit and be obedient, then there's added faith, then there's added hope, then there's added charity. Like it just continues to build on top of each other. So even by you being willing to follow the promptings, obviously it saved your life in the long run as well. But I also believe the Lord blessed you with greater faith and greater compassion and all those other things because you showed humility and obedience.
Mm-hmm. And I'm actually grateful for the trials that I had before that, like being homeless, jobless, and all that junk. And all the things that I had to deal with where I had to work off of faith, because what that did is that prepared me, exercised my faith that I didn't know why. There was times, so when after all that happened, I had Leah and Brandy baby, I finally got us into this apartment and finally got us settled. I had a job, a good job, and then I had them in daycare. I was in a good ward. I was like going, finally, I'm settled. And then the Lord goes, time to go back home. And I'm like, and so I got so much flack from people who were obviously not hearing my promptings, and so they're going, why would you do that? You're in, you know. And I've gotten so much flack from so many different things because I have always tried to go by the faith, because the faith, even when it's painful in the moment, it always proves itself out. You give it enough time. And that helped me to, when I started facing cancer, I was like, I was all bracing myself for this big battle where I had a, you know, sword in hand and everything. And I was amazed that it was not, I know my battle wasn't as painful as it was. It wasn't as difficult as some people do because of the tools that I used to battle it, to fight it, to feel stronger. And I was telling Celeste that I use tools constantly, and one of them is music. I gave her a list, and we could post on the webpage or whatever. I call it my fight list. And this is not just for cancer anymore. And I guess you guys will have to forgive me. My passion is I want my experience to help other people find their own tools, because it's no good. That experience, that trial is no good. It's not even valuable to me if I don't feel like it helps, you know, me and other people. Yeah. And so that's how I'm making it valuable. I'm going, okay, if even if it's like, oh gosh, think about the worst thing that you could think of, and mine was cancer. But when you think about something that's really horrible, there can be no upside, right? There just absolutely cannot be an upside. What you do is you get stubborn, like I do, and you go, I'm going to put an upside down. Yep. I'm going to put a value in that, and I'm going to make it valuable. Just to give you an example, when I was attacked, I'm being very vulnerable here, but I feel like this is what does it good. When I was attacked, I was raped in Utah twice. And so it's really, really difficult to go, okay, what good can you pull from that? You know, that is really horrible. But you know what? If I can come across a young woman someday and she comes to me and she tells me that she was raped, she can not only, if I can tell her that she's going to be okay and that I understand and I believe her, but also she can look at me and go, okay, if she can be okay, she can be strong, then that gives her hope.
Yeah.
Then now that's valuable to me.
Right.
Not just to her, it's valuable to me. It's
I
not
love
some
that.
horrible thing that happened to me.
I love that because I think sometimes, because you were obviously a real victim in those scenarios, and not in a negative tone where we call people victims, but you actually were a victim in that. And so when you're able to be a true victim and be able to spin that around and use the experience that traumatized you and have it in your head, like, now that I've gone through this and the things that I've learned from this, I want to share and help others. I mean, that's just like you said, it's like taking that control. It's like, I'm not going to let my attacker have all the control in this. No, I'm going to take my experience and I'm
Yep.
going to make it good. I'm going to go out and somehow make the world a little more beautiful, despite the fact that I just went through that horrific or those horrific situations. And think about if everybody did that, because I think sometimes in our culture, in the church culture, we tend to put on like a fake face, right? Like we go into church and we got our little smiles on, and no one really knows what we're dealing with behind the scenes. Now, sometimes if you're having cancer and things like that, like you can't really hide it as well. But I think there's many things that each of us are struggling with on the daily. And if we'd be willing to be vulnerable and willing to share, like we could support and help and lift and give hope to other people who are secretly struggling with similar things, or who may down the road be struggling with similar things. And I think that's why one of the reasons why the Lord allows things to happen in our lives is because he
Yep,
knows
absolutely.
we can use it to better and help other people.
And I know it sounds like, and I really did not want this to come across and say like, I've done all this. This is, I mean, I know that the biggest reason I've been able to do things I've done is because I have turned upward, but I want this to be something that, like I said, a tool. And honestly, it's selfish in a way. And I'm okay with that. It's selfish because if I'm making it valuable to somebody else or useful to somebody else, and it becomes valuable to me, then it helped in that healing. It helped me with that traumatic experience. And that's what I want. So it's half selfish and it's half serving.
This is the thing, but it's selfish, but not with a negative meaning. Like, of course, it is something that you're gaining from, and it's about you, and it's something that you feel good when you can share and help and lift. But
Yeah.
I don't know. The term works, but it can't have the negative tone to it.
Well, it's rewarding, that's for sure. I don't know. I think that it can benefit both. It can benefit us. In fact, I would even say the benefit to others is that it benefited us. I think what I learned through, when I look back on challenges I've had in my life, there are these phases where it's very easy to blame the person that took advantage of you somehow, that hurt you somehow. But there's this beautiful place in healing where you start to realize, you know what, I was doing a dance with that person, or I was naive, or I allowed people to take advantage of me, or I put myself in dangerous situations with people I thought I could trust, but I couldn't, and so that doesn't mean I should have been taken advantage of. That doesn't justify the sin against me, right. But it does teach me to be more mature and to be more, what's careful. A better word, more resilient. And more careful and more, to create safety for myself, not to rely on some benevolent world to kind of create that for me. I mean, we're in a dark world right now. We need to be savvy. Mm-hmm. And if I can learn that, and if me sharing that story with someone can help them before they even get into those situations, I mean, that would be ideal.
Right.
That's the first choice. Right.
Right. Because I think we would never want to imply that anybody that's a victim, it's their own doing, right? Ever. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Like you couldn't have done anything that could have justified having someone attack you and rape you. There's nothing on your end.
There's no justification.
Right. But I think that there's truth in sharing, this is my story. And this, if I, I could have swapped things, or maybe now that I went through what I went through, I'm going to teach others, maybe
What
whatever
to be
this would
careful of.
yeah, because then you can use it again. It's like using that experience to help others and give them a safer, maybe, game plan. Again, it doesn't at all reflect any type of blame on the victim, like whatsoever. But there are
You,
things
you
we can
know,
kind of put in place to keep ourselves a little added safety, so we don't have to rely on idiots to not make the choices that they might make.
And it doesn't just help other people, but it helps me too. Because the first thing I did when I got back to Virginia is I went and got a concealed carry permit, and I bought myself a Ruger LCP2 and a 20 gauge shotgun. It was amazing how much
oh
control
my gosh,
I felt.
there you go.
That's awesome.
You try to rape me, but you're gonna lose body parts over that. You know,
I've actually feel bad for the man that tries to attack me in the future.
Well,
the analogy I use is, listen, if I walk in a bad neighborhood in the dark with $50 bills hanging out of my pockets, do I deserve to be robbed? Absolutely not. That's not right. But is it wise for me to do so? No, it's not. And it's not, I think 95% of people aren't going to rob me. But there are 5%, there's evil out there. There are people who are predators. There are people who are looking to take advantage of people. And I need to be wise to that. I need to be wise to that. Put your money in a wallet, walk in the daytime in that neighborhood, and that doesn't mean that you're to blame if something goes wrong. Because even after all the things we do to keep ourselves safe,
bad things can
we may
happen.
still get hurt. Yeah, we may still get hurt. And what could you do?
And honestly, that question is exactly one of the things I wanted to mention in this process, is that you ask yourself, what can I do? So one of the things, when I was first diagnosed, my aunt, actually, who went through breast cancer herself, she told me, I was like, oh, well, I'm going to be stuck in my room for a long time. I'm going to start doing things. I painted my room purple. I put the glow in the dark stars on the ceiling. I mounted a TV so that I could, and she's like, oh, Syra, you're not going to care. And I was just like, no, I am going to care, because I want to care. I want to care. I want to be. So a lot of these things, understanding that we cannot avoid the trials, the bad things that happen to us, but we can prepare for them, just like our emergency supply, right? We can go ahead and make sure that we have the tools necessary, that when they come, not if, when they come, we will be prepared. And so I created my fight list, I created my support system. I created an environment that made me feel good, and that honestly, it made a lot of difference. This was to cancer, but this applies to so many other things in life for everybody, that no matter what it is, just ask yourself, what can I do? Because you can do something. You can
be proactive.
Yes. Right. And that requires faith, but it brings hope.
And the thing is when you focus on the fact that you have control and you have a choice that you can make on how you want to approach or enter or deal with whatever it is you're about to deal with, like, it does remove that victim mentality. And I think there's a lot of strength with positive thought, right? So if you're not sitting there feeling like a victim, and the negative effects that can have on your body, it's going to be a benefit. If you're thinking positive, if you're thinking ahead, if you're preparing yourself and being like, okay, I can do this, whatever it is, it's still going to be a bumpy ride. I'm not going to say it's going to take away all the bumps or anything, but I do believe that you are a healthier person through it, emotionally, maybe even physically, if you have a positive outlook. Like it just kind of is. It's almost like, isn't that like a chemical thing in the brain, John? Like, isn't that what happens?
Listen, everything we think and do changes our chemistry, just so you know. And the question becomes, what do you want your chemistry to be? And do you want to, I really believe there's like a depression chemistry. There's an anxiety chemistry. There's a victim chemistry, and there's there is a wisdom chemistry. There's a calm chemistry. And and we don't have to be victims to our chemistry either.
No.
We really, and I guess in a way, that's what my job is, to train people how to change their chemistry. I mean, I train them how to change their mind.
And it sometimes can start with a little assistance, as you know. I do take medications that help me, but I'm using them as tools, and I can almost sense.
Well, they could be like stepping stones.
Yeah, exactly.
I walk on them to get across the river, and once I'm across the river, I may be able to. I don't need them,
But you
or
leave
maybe
them
I do.
behind for someone else who comes behind you to use your stepping stones. Like, I think that there's knowledge in where to place your stone, what stone you need to place, and like all of that. And so if you kind of put those stones as, I mean, obviously they're not real stones, but those things in place, people can follow your example. People can maybe even utilize exactly, because we just had someone say, hey, what's your playlist? I'd like to know your playlist. So you can utilize those tools or those stones and distribute them, and other people can learn and benefit.
And you need those tools too, because like I sense it sometimes. I don't know if it's coming from the people listening or whatever, but I've also gotten it so many times in the past where they're going, oh, it's all great to say, have a positive attitude. And you can fake it till you make it. Sometimes you can use tools to help you get there and everything. But there are times when it's not going to be easy to do it. And it's okay. But this is one thing that I decided, and this is why I wanted to address this thought, because I can almost hear people go, oh, it's easier said than done, right? But this is what I figured out. I figured that if I decide or figure out what I'm going to do beforehand, how I'm going to fight that, then when the time comes, I have better tools to fight it. And then the other part of it is that it's part of a grieving process too, because even though nobody died, part of me died, right? Because I can no longer get a certain part of me back that cancer's taken away. So I relate it to the grieving process. Okay. So when I got divorced, I like I said, I still loved him, and I knew I was going to have to grieve, and I knew it was going to be extremely painful. And so I says, but you know what? I'm not going to drag this out for a year or 2 years. I'm going to go through this as hard as I need to. I was like, I'm one of those people, I'm like, I'll deal with intense pain if it shortens the time, right? So, but I had to make a decision that I was going to allow myself to feel the way I needed to feel. You're going to have crappy days. It's okay. You're going to feel like crying, screaming, breaking something. It's okay to feel that way, but decide that after you get those feelings out, after you vent them, after you exercise them, after you process them, you're going to decide to get back up and try again, because that's the key to fighting those negative thoughts, the negative cycle. You break it when you have decided beforehand, this is my out. Okay, I vented enough. Time to get back up and go to my tools. Right. If you don't have those tools, you will struggle.
And I think it's important to point out, because there's two extremes you can take with that. You can either live in the sorrow, right, and not ever leave it, or you can ignore the sorrow, right, and just suppress all of that. And neither of them are healthy.
And that'll bite you later.
And that'll come back, because it's not going to stay suppressed forever, right? That's going to
walk the middle path.
Right. So it's almost like, I think, because I always try to tell my kids, I'm like, in that moment, acknowledge how you feel, whether it's rational or not. I don't know why I'm feeling so jealous right now about whatever, but acknowledge, hey, I'm feeling jealous. Why? I don't know, but I am feeling this, and then, but what can
I going to do about it?
Yeah. But how am I going to react? Yeah. Because I told them, I'm like, sometimes your feelings don't match your logic. Like your logic, like I shouldn't be doing this or thinking this or saying whatever, like they don't match sometimes, and that's okay. But you still have to validate yourself. Okay, I do feel this way. Maybe I need to talk to therapists about it, but I do feel this way, and then decide how you're going to react. So I think that transition is what's most important, because you can't ignore it and hop over it and suppress it. And you can't just sit there and dwell in the negative thought, because either way, it's going to mess things up.
See, this now you're giving me, you're preparing everyone for a little Johnny life hack.
Okay, cool.
So here's what's interesting. The first feeling you feel in response to a trauma or a trigger or something that stresses you is almost never the the true underlying feeling.
Hmm.
And so it's almost always masked at first. In fact, fight or flight, you could almost say, just count, because that tends to be anger, fear, shame. Those are like three big ones. And they are almost never the one that you need to get to. And what that usually is are things like pain, hurt, suffering, sorrow, things like that. Now, and here's what's interesting, especially in relationships. Those triggered emotions are, I call them push away emotions. They literally, they trigger a fear response in everyone around you. And unless they are super on top of their own junk, it will push them away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whereas pain, sorrow, hurt draw people in.
Mm.
And that's where the vulnerability comes in. What are you being vulnerable about? I'm being vulnerable that I'm really pissed off. Okay, well, that's not being vulnerable, probably.
Right.
What I really am is I'm hurt. And I got really angry about it at first, but then I realized underneath that anger is just, I feel just sick inside about and feel really hurt. Well, as soon as you go there, there's not a lot of blame in that. It's just kind of like, I just feel hurt, you know? And then when someone says that, I just feel hurt and they're not lashing out. What do you want to do? Yeah, you want to embrace them. You want to hold them. You want to say it's okay. And anyway, keep that in mind in your dating too. So.
Yeah, well, I think that this, even though we're talking cancer in general, like this, like she says, this principle, ability, you know, how to deal with things, and like it can go with any challenge. And there are a lot of challenges in the single LDS world. I'm telling you, there's a lot of struggles.
Absolutely.
To maneuver through this.
Well, and let's use Syra's story, because Syra, you and I have talked about how much of that trauma contributed to your cancer. Meaning that there's a book and the title is The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah. Right.
And the idea behind it is you might handle it great, you might deal with the emotions, whatever, but your body, if again, stress changes the chemistry.
Yep, it does. Yeah.
I absolutely believe
that chemistry contribute to tumors and to, you know, other illnesses, you know, blood sugar levels. You know, there's all kinds of manifestations of these emotional problems.
Especially the ones that are either really traumatic or that haven't been dealt with, because I realize, and I have some other not so terrible health issues or challenges, as I put them, that have made it, you know, that's been difficult to deal with. And had I had better tools to deal with back then, to deal with all these traumatic events, and as you said, what they do, I don't believe my trauma and all these things gave me cancer. What it did is it weakened and put my body into a state where I was vulnerable to getting cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's what I believe happened wholeheartedly. And it weakened my ability to be able to, because it all has to do with the immune system. What does trauma do? What does sickness do? It lowers your immune system, you know?
That's the
And
stress.
Well, here's the thing. What's the most deadly substance? You know, the most deadly substance you can take into yourself is probably soda. Yeah. And soda is like the big delivery system for it. But what's the most deadly substance? Is probably cortisol. If we really knew how deadly that it, and cortisol has its purpose inside of our body, but we are so saturated with it day to day, all the time in this crazy world. But what is it? It's stress. We're not managing. So I haven't seen any research on it, but I have a little theory that those knee-jerk reactions, those emotions, those automatic pilot emotions, the fight or flight ones, to me, those are the deadly substances. Mm-hmm. The chemistry of sorrow and, you know, and pain and hurt, I honestly don't think that they're as damaging. Those ones that draw people in, that are humble and sweet and just admit that they're powerless and that they're struggling and asking for help. And to me, it's almost like you get to feel those, even though we might call them negative, without the consequences of experiencing those other emotions.
The debilitation.
That's
I
interesting.
think it's funny. Brian said I'd argue that potassium cyanide is a little worse than soda or sugar.
Again, that's taking it from outside itself, but yes.
Sorry, I found that funny.
Most of us aren't taking that on a regular basis.
Yeah. And I sure hope not.
It's kind of like saying which drug is most addictive, and people would think it would be heroin or meth, but it's nicotine and then the chemistry of porn, which is a drug. You know, it's when they say fight the new drug, they're not kidding.
It's because it does something in your brain.
It's a dopamine.
Not something you're eating or putting in your body that way, but through your eyes visually.
Well, and that makes it more insidious. The drug dealer is your own body.
Right. Exactly. You're fighting against yourself. Yeah.
Right. So,
I've seen, sorry, I'm not trying to take over.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I just noticed a couple comments that I wanted to, I've noticed that a couple of people have mentioned the fact that we put this face on, and we mentioned it, where we say, I'm fine, and we put this face on and pretend and stuff like that. And there's a song called Truth Be Told. I think it's by Michael West. No, correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, it's called Truth Be Told. And that is an amazing song, because I feel like this is one of my songs on my list, is that I feel like I'm saying, yeah, I'm fine. Hey, I'm fine. No, I'm fine, but I'm not.
Right.
And I think that there's really a truth, or there's a power in telling the truth, not getting buried in it, not submerging in it, but telling the truth. Because once, I feel like half the time when I struggle with something, when I vocalize it, it leaves my body, that thought has now entered the universe and it is out of my head, or at least that's the visualization I use.
It lessens the stress on the inside. I swear it does.
It does.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes when we say, and we don't have to, there is a level to that, and this is another thing that I realized with my cancer experience, is that, and we're all human. So let me preface this with the fact that I do realize we are all human beings and that we're not perfect. So I do not judge anybody for this. And that's one thing I've learned, especially when people make offensive comments or obnoxious comments about cancer. You just get a boob job. Can I just strangle you?
Right.
Anyway.
Right.
But there's a lot to be said about what you're, I totally just lost my train of thought.
Well, you were talking about how people can be offensive and stuff, and I think you were going to talk about how you can handle that with grace or something like that. But maybe we're going down another road.
Yeah. When people, they mean the best and everything, and I think that when we accept, I'll remember what I was going with, but when we accept that people, I was going with the idea that I have actually entered an area that I never really had thought that I would have to enter. I mean, it makes sense, but I have been rejected because I have battled cancer. And this is something that I didn't think that that I would have to deal with. That people would still see me for me and stuff like that, because in my head, I know my value. But it's scary when you meet somebody that's had a health problem like cancer. I mean, what if they get it again? What if they, don't change? And even just judging. I mean, I see a lot of people that judge me or that make comments about my appearance and stuff. You know what? I have played a lot with makeup, and there's a reason for that. Not only just because I find it fun, because my eyebrows and my eyelashes disappeared and I lost my hair for a time. So when I started getting all those back, I'm like going, you know what? All I want to see is I want to see me when I look in the mirror, and then I just understand that people are not going to see that. So this has been a real hard thing for me, because I'm still the same woman. I'm still powerful and everything. but it has totally shifted my perspective when it comes to dating. I mean, it's another single adult issue.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. I mean, I think you're just kind of implying that. Have you been in a situation where someone wouldn't engage in a relationship with you because you have had cancer and they're worried about, having that to deal with at a later date? If something
Thankfully, well, actually, there was one gentleman that commented, and this one I can kind of understand. The only one where they said it outright was when a gentleman said he had lost his previous wife and he couldn't handle the idea that if his another wife, got it and lost her life, that it would be too traumatic. I get that,
Yeah.
that I totally understand, and this is why it's
Yeah,
really
I mean, that's him being vulnerable and just saying, I've lost this way before, and it's not your fault, but I don't know if I can manage that again.
And now I can separate from being me. But thankfully, I have not had experiences where somebody has outright said, been rude or very blunt with it or anything. But I have been, rejected or turned down or, not interested kind of thing, because it's tough. And even the changes that it does to my body, thankfully, my hair's growing back. Eventually, it'll grow long and everything. And my eyebrows, they're not totally back. My eyelashes are little stubs and everything. And I gained 35 pounds when I went through chemo, or I thought I was going to lose weight, and I'd worked really hard before I got cancer to lose a lot of weight, and I got in shape and I looked great. I felt good and everything. And then it all just went down. And now with my reconstruction path, I'm having to put a lot of my goals off to the side because of the path so this takes a lot. This is where I'm exercising that faith, where I'm exercising that patience, because it's hard. And I'm hoping that people that are listening are going to go, yes, that's what I'm doing, not with the cancer, but they're going, yes, it's hard, because in the moment it's really painful to be rejected. But we have to kind of hang on to that and go, you know what? I trust the Lord. I know that I'm going to get my body back. And even beyond this life, my body will be perfected one day. But who am I? What am I going to do with myself in the meantime to create value so that when the right person comes along, he will recognize that value in me.
Absolutely.
I love it.
I think you need to make a bumper sticker with all that on there. Just kidding.
That would be
a few quotes for a bumper sticker.
I would get really close to reading it all. It's pretty fabulous. But you know what? I've been wanting to say something about faith because we keep bringing this up and it just keeps popping into my head. It's interesting because I was less active. I really didn't start going to church until, other than when I was a little kid, I would walk to church alone and go to church. But I wasn't until I was about 21, maybe 22, 21, I think. I started going to church again. And it was interesting because I know my family was kind of culturally LDS. We had some basic concepts, we didn't drink and smoke. We loved driving by the temple, things like that. But we really didn't go to church and learn all of the scripture stories and all that, right? I kind of was lacking that. So when I started going back and they gave me the primary callings and stuff like that, I was learning with the kids. I was like, oh my gosh, did you know? And they're looking at me like, well, yeah, of course. But the one thing I did learn that really shifted my understanding of faith is that faith is actually not something we can generate ourselves. It's actually a gift from God. So when he sees us striving to be who we are, or who we're supposed to be, wanting to follow, having that heart full of obedience and desire, he actually blesses us with the faith, right? So it's actually a gift. It's not anything we can do on our own. We can't make it. It's not like we're like, oh, I'm going to gain faith because I'm going to go and do, right? No, it's given. It's a given gift. And so, but what's interesting is once it's given, like you said, and you access it and you utilize it and you show the Lord that you are benefiting from it, it's like a cyclical thing. All of a sudden, oh, well, then here's some more faith. Oh, well, here's some more. And it becomes this building block and it just goes, it's like a tower.
I think that's what becomes hope, because you start to see that pattern that faith begets blessing.
Right.
You know, even if the blessings aren't exactly what I anticipated they would be, you know, my life is improved through faith to the point where, oh, I'm starting to get this now. And to me, that's the hope. That's where hope comes in. I will give you evidence that your faith is directed in the right direction, you know. So,
And not the everyday version of hope that well, maybe it'll happen.
no,
Hope
no,
is
no,
actually a
no.
firm belief. It's a knowledge that it's going to
Almost like a ceiling, almost like a ceiling of your faith, almost like a validation of your faith. You know, it's almost like perfecting your faith. You're starting to feel like, oh my gosh, this is really powerful and it works. And to me, it's that bridge to charity. You know, where charity to me is like, if you tell people, how do I know my calling and election is made sure? And what you can always link it with is, I am filled with charity. And what is the greatest quality that they said you want to have in the last days? Charity, you know?
I think faith and hope even, but especially faith is a muscle. I call it my faith muscle. And the only way to build it is to exercise it. And like you said, Celeste, is that when you exercise it the first time, it gets bigger.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what happens, is that your faith builds just like a muscle. It creates bulk and everything. And the only way that you're going to exercise that is with that resistance. So I have a saying that I always, especially when I was first counselor in the Relief Society, I was always telling the ladies, I was like, if we truly understood what our trials and our challenges could do for us, if we could really see the big picture, see what they can do for us, we wouldn't want them to go away.
Right.
You know,
Right.
because they are going to help us to become the kind of person that we want to be. And honestly, in a way that we could not be without them, you know? And so that's the way I look at it.
And it's interesting. Today I was reading in the scriptures, and I'm going to have to find, okay, it's in Philippians 4:4. And it says, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. And I was reading over that, and I had to kind of, because I'm in school, I had to kind of go in there and give a little what that says to me. And it was interesting because as I was reading it and writing about it, it says always, right? So in every moment in our life, we're supposed to be rejoicing. And I got, I've had a massive trial with my divorce, pre-divorce, everything that led up to it, post-divorce, it's still just piling. Like I feel like it's like, is this ever going to end? It's been 7 years now. I mean, I'm like, dang, is this going to end? But it makes me realize that I believe that in those trials, if we're willing to rejoice, like you're saying, and find something positive out of it, like, okay, I don't like this trial, but you know what? I like who it's making me become. I'm rejoicing in the Lord because he's allowing this into my life because I can be strengthened by it. And so even in the crappiest of times, if we can rejoice in our Savior and rejoice in his love and not turn away, because I think a lot of people turn away because they feel like they've been abandoned or whatever by the Lord. But if we're able to embrace it and rejoice in him and find joy and find a positive lining, a silver lining, however you want to say that, it's just going to make that situation a positive and a plus in our life, even though we might never want to relive it. It's just something we can still move forward from.
I mean, it makes it to where we never have to relive it.
Right.
You know, meaning the lesson has been learned. What would be the purpose in any further suffering that in that way anyway? Now we move on to the next lesson kind of thing. It reminds me, I call it the therapist's favorite scripture. I mean, it's my favorite scripture. And it's Ether 12:27, you know, making weak things become strong. But if you think about it, what are the two things Christ talks about us having that enable him to make our weak things become strong unto us? Because he's the one doing that, not us.
Right,
okay?
exactly. Yeah.
But it's like, if you are humble and you have faith in me,
right,
then will I make weak things strong unto you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, I've thought a lot about humility and faith. And I've come up with this phrase that I tell myself. Humility is the acknowledgement that I am weak and I need his help. And faith is the acknowledgement that he is strong and he will help me. And
I like that.
And so he's saying to us, know that you are weak and that you need help, and then lean on me, and then will I make weak things strong unto you. I will make you like me.
I've got a great analogy that goes right along with that.
Go
And
for
that
it.
is, if you go into a race, okay, if you're a regular marathon runner or whatever, you run on a regular basis. When you first do it, don't you sit there and go, oh my gosh, is this ever going to end? Right. But if you run enough races, you know that end is coming. You know the satisfaction, you know the physical strength that comes from it, the cheers, you know what's coming at the end. And that's the same thing with trials. When you've been through it enough times, you can start
you don't
looking ahead, and that's how you can have joy in the middle of the trial.
Because you know the end is going to come because you've been through it, right? And
feel it.
because time, I love this quote by President Benson. It was in one of his books. It wasn't like a talk or anything, but because he was author, I loved his books. But he loved the phrase, time is on the side of truth. Meaning, if given enough time, truth will be made known. And so I love to think about that because it's like, in enough time, this trial will end and I will understand why I need to go through it, or
Truth
I
will
can
be
understand
proven.
what I've gained from it. Like time in that way, if we can lift our sight just a little bit and look off in the distance and not be like only in the here and now, that actually is going to help us in the long run because we know I have faith, I have hope, I have true knowledge that at the end, somewhere in time, or even maybe after this life, there is going to be reprieve. Like that brings that hope on, and it gives us.
And we live in a time in history when we're not going to have to wait till we're 90, I don't think, for the greatest finish line in the history of human beings on this earth. And that's why I think we're given signs of the times, and we're told the stories of the prophecies and what will happen. It's because God wants us to know how long the race is. Right when, if we're running a marathon here, if I think the marathon is going to be 50 miles, I mean, I'm going to get discouraged at 20 miles. But if I know it's 26.1 or whatever it is, I'm going to get excited at 20 miles. I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to finish this thing.
I'm going to sprint.
And like, I'm going to just kick trash for the rest of this race.
Yeah.
But it's also going to get more painful and hotter at the end too. Your calves are burning. You're starting to get dehydrated, and this is the last days. Our fires are getting hotter. That's why when I got cancer, I was like, oh my gosh, this is another one. This is my fire burning.
But that enthusiasm, to me, it's kind of like kicking in those endorphins and that adrenaline and it's almost like your body just says, go for it. And so I think that when we talk about sheep and goats and wheat and tares, I think what you're going to see is people are going to drop off and become exhausted and drop out. And other people are going to get excited and enthusiastic and sprint to the finish.
Yeah, it's going to be like, let's finish strong, right?
And I just want to have the perspective that I'm going to kick trash till the end of this race, and I just have to.
Running.
I know.
What's that?
She hates running.
I hate to run.
Well,
that's partly because it's painful.
But it's just a metaphor, thankfully, because I'm not a huge runner myself. But
I used to be, but I've got a bad knee, so it's not my fan anymore. So we are just about to enter into our audience participation section. So we already have a hand raised, but if there's anyone in the audience that wants to come on, ask a question, give a comment, whatever, please just raise your hand and we'll just do it in order. And when you come on, you can just use audio if you'd like, or if you want to turn on your video and audio, that is up to you. So first we have David. Come on, buddy.
David.
What do you gotta say, David?
He's asking for the list.
Well,
Right? Sorry, I'm washing tomatoes, so I have
No,
my
it's fine.
video off.
It's okay.
But Syra, listening to your story, there are so many similarities with mine. My daughter has no memory of her mom.
Yeah.
All of the struggles, all of the sorrow, all of the pain, and really the grief. I felt all of that, but I just have to say this has been an extremely powerful podcast tonight, because there's so much faith, there's so much grit and determination, and this is not going to lick me. Just that mentality of, what, no matter what comes our way, it's not going to lick us. And that is so powerful. And when you combine that with faith, there's nothing that you can't accomplish. And so you are a huge inspiration to me. You are an example to me. I love you. You're amazing. And just keep fighting the good fight. That's all I can say.
Thank
Awesome.
you, David. I really appreciate that. And I got to tell you, whether or not anybody else says anything, that's what I needed. That's what I needed from tonight. I needed to know that these things that I struggle with, that they will do good. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I love you too.
And
I think you're both
there's
sweethearts.
there's so much power in sharing stories.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I talk about in Boise is, we each have our own story to tell. And if that could help somebody in their struggle, then it was worth every single moment.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, I think when we're able to speak, first of all, if you consider that everything was created by Christ speaking, by his words, he said and things came about. I think if we stop to consider the power of our words, the Spirit can testify to everyone who's within that can hear. There's just so much. So when we share our stories, when we encourage people, just like how David was just being so positive with his words, like it can affect those around us.
Right.
And so obviously, if we can just get something, even just that, share your story, uplift others, let people know that they're not alone, because more than likely there's someone out there who's dealing with something extremely similar to
I
what
can
you-
promise you, David, whether you have seen it or not, you are influencing other people.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. You're going to make me cry now. Gosh, stop it.
No, it's true. It's true.
I can't be the only one.
Well, it's true, because David was willing to come on and share his story. He's been on the podcast and he's very vocal in the chat, and he loves to make comments. And I believe every time he's willing to share and put himself out there, it benefits others. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. I'll be quiet now.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, David. We appreciate it. We always do. All right. Looks like we've got Paul Jr. If you want to come on.
Yeah, so I was thinking earlier, I've known Syra for a long time, and so I've been around while she went through this cancer struggle, and we were talking about she brought up the good point of how building her faith prior to this prepared her to go through the challenge, right? And one of my favorite scriptures, Helaman 5:12, talks about when we build a firm foundation in Christ, when the devil sends forth his mighty winds and it can't drag you down because of that sure foundation. It can't drag you down into endless misery and woe, right? And the thought occurred to me, so I hadn't thought about it that way until Syra said that, and then it got me to thinking her faith didn't just build a firm foundation for her, but as the head of household, her home is built on that firm foundation. And I was surprised when she got diagnosed. I actually pulled her kids aside individually and was to check on them, because I was surprised at how much it wasn't affecting them as much as I thought it would, right? And I thought maybe they were bottling it up, but they just were going forward on faith, right? They were worried, they were concerned, but they weren't overcome with dread, right? And I think the way Syra has raised her kids in appreciating the spirit and having faith and love for Christ, I think not only did that prepare Syra for that challenge, but it prepared her kids for that challenge, right? And I think for those around her, the rest of her family and myself, I think seeing her handle it with such hope. We and her earlier today were talking about hope and defining hope. And I think it made it easier, at least for me, to have faith in the system and to trust the Lord because she trusted the Lord so much. And I couldn't help but follow her example, right? So I think it made her journey easier, but I think it also made her a light in the darkness for those around her to also handle that challenge and learn from it, right? I've never even spent the night in a hospital, nevertheless had a major health issue, never even broken a bone, never had stitches. But I think if and when I ever am in a situation like that, I've learned through her experiences and picked up tools. For me, life is about collecting tools, putting tools in your box, in your toolbox, right? And not just picking it up, putting it in your toolbox, but using it frequently, right? So that way, when you need that scripture or you need that conference talk or you need that, like it's there and you're practiced at using it. So one of my favorite TV shows in the 90s was Home Improvement, and Wilson, the next door neighbor, said a smart person learns from their mistakes. A wise person learns from other people's mistakes. And take mistakes out of it. A wise person learns from other people's experiences. So I've gained value in seeing Syra go through. I said earlier in the chat, she looked really good with no hair, by the way. Right?
I saw that comment.
Yeah.
Probably not the side.
I was thinking, I'm like, she has a face. She could totally go without the hair and be totally all right.
she looks better with hair, but she pulled off the no hair thing pretty well.
She was rocking a baldy head, huh?
Until I turned to the side, and then I had this like alien thing going on.
Oh no!
What?
So I think for anybody that knows Syra, these last 2 years have been a good learning experience. There's somebody else in our group that Syra and I know from singles group that was also dealing with breast cancer a little bit before Syra. And I just think knowing those people and hearing them sharing their stories is great because it gives the rest of us a chance to have empathy and to learn through their experiences without having to actually go through it ourselves. And I think that's what fellowshipping is. I think that's an important point, that you almost can't have an experience without it affecting someone else. The question is, how will it affect them? And in a lot of ways, it's not so much the experience, it's how you respond to the experience. Right. And what I hear you saying is Syra just responded in a really courageous way, and that impacts other people for sure.
I mean, think about if her kids hit a hard time, and they will, right? When your kids, I should say, hit something difficult, they're going to be able to reflect on how you handled this situation, and that's going to give them more hope and strength and courage to handle it similarly. And I think that's like, what greater gift can you give your child and than the ability to maneuver through trials with a smile on your face? I mean, that would be amazing.
I mean, who would ever call breast cancer a blessing, right? But I think it has blessed their lives.
Yeah, I think there's another really important point, and that is that you mentioned earlier that just because you have faith doesn't mean you don't worry. Right. And some people get the idea that if I had faith, I wouldn't worry. And it's like, that's not what we're talking about with faith. Faith is believing that even though you worry, you still believe that this will lead to something good, and in the end, and whether that's in this life or the next, that through Christ there is no bad outcome,
Right.
and
Well, you
And
brought out a point, another tool that I think has been invaluable in any situation, but especially in mine. And he's one of them. And one of those tools is creating an incredible support system.
Right.
Uh, he has been one of those friends that has he's been there for me and my children when he didn't have to be. And friends like that are one of the greatest tools that you can possibly have. And I'm surrounded by them. I love that. And I feel like that's another thing that can give us hope when we're struggling with something, is go out and love somebody or serve somebody, because when you do that, it's an inevitable fact that it comes back and feeds you as well, and you find strength. But that's one of the tools. So remember that, write it down in your journals. One of the other tools is having real friends and real support system. And it is not just friends, but family, friends. It's critical.
That's worth the trip to Virginia right there. The Lord knows us, and when I say he knows us and everyone around us, or who he wants around us. And that's the thing. He'll move you to Virginia to be around them for the time that you need to have that support system there, even though it deprives you of the Utah dating scene and so many options for that second marriage and probably the second divorce.
Hey.
But
that's not the message we like to give on
wait
this
a minute,
podcast,
wait.
John.
That's
You're in the wrong
terrible.
I'm just kidding.
Hey,
so
John.
our faith and our testimony and our relationship with Christ, building on what John said a few minutes ago, isn't going to stop us from experiencing hard times or bad things happen.
Exactly.
What it's going to do is prepare us to handle those and get the blessings from those challenging times, right? Bad things will still happen to us. September 11th, there was a lot of talk about, how could God allow that to happen? And it's not, being a Christian and following Christ isn't going to prevent those bad things, but it's going to prepare us to learn and grow from those bad things.
Well, and think of all the good that came from an event like that, or the Vegas shooting, or all these other things, where people rallied together or people saved each other, or what, and it's like, do we wish that had not happened? Yeah, it would have been better had it not happened. But if it's going to happen, how did we respond to it?
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure Syra would love to have her entire body back, but it's still a blessing. At least for those around us. Yeah, eventually.
You'll get it. Oh, thank you so much, Paul, for coming on and sharing with us. We appreciate that. So I did want to say one thing real quick about what Paul was just saying about the scripture about in Helaman 5:12, and he was pointing out the fact that it says that if you build this foundation on Christ, that you cannot fall. And what I love about that scripture is cannot is absolute. It's not, you might not, or it'll be harder to fall, or you probably won't fall. Like, it is an absolute, you cannot fall. It is a
sure foundation.
Promise. If you do this, this is what you receive. 100%. And so I think that, as like Syra's saying, as you build that foundation, as you prepare for the hardships in life, by having stronger faith, by trying to cultivate that, trying to receive more blessings, to gain more understanding and hope and charity and all those things that make us stronger and become a better person and more like Christ. As we do that, we're building that foundation. And then when those storms hit, because they surely will, we'll still be in the storm, still feel the storm, we'll still get pummeled by the storm, but we won't fall. We can't fall.
I think it's important, that's why faith, we use the word faith, but we really need to finish that and say faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. He really is the only foundation of that faith that will never fail us. I can put faith in my kids and my parents and my spouse and my, but I will all they everyone all of them will all have a bad day no matter how much they love me. But there's one person I know who cannot have a bad day bad enough to let me down, and he proved that just over 2,000 years ago, and he proves it. He keeps proving it over and over and over. And so that's the thing. And that's what he said. If you are humble and you have faith in me,
Right. Right.
And there's really no other being that we need to have faith in.
No, it's all about our Savior.
Yep.
So we're getting here close to the end, but I do want to ask you one more question, Syra, and then you can kind of close this out. So here's my thought. So we've been talking about us as individuals. We have talked a little bit about being an example to others and things like that. But what would you suggest those of us who are on the outside looking in on someone who's struggling, whatever cause, cancer, divorce, whatever, there's so many things. What would you say is the best way to put ourselves in their lives, but not get too, up in there, and support them? And what would be the best way to communicate? Because I think sometimes like when we go to our wards, like when I first got a divorce and I showed up church, people didn't even want to look me in the face. They weren't quite sure what to say or do or how to act. I don't think they were trying to be mean. I don't think they were
wrong thing.
casting judgment on me, but they just weren't sure what to do. So what would you suggest we do from the outside to help those who are in a trial such as yours?
I think the biggest thing that comes to my mind, and I feel like it's truly one of the most, if not the most powerful thing, is express and show not just love, but believe in them. I feel like of all the trials that happened in my life, the ones where I rose above and I was able to gain the strength and the insight and the growth and everything that I wanted so badly is when somebody believed in me and they expressed it to me. And that is love. So it's all encompassing in a way, but I really believe that believing in somebody and telling them that you believe in them, but at the same time, I have to say, don't minimize their struggle, but tell them, I know this must be so painful. And I can't even imagine what it's like for you, but I believe in you. And just say it with all your heart. And I'm telling you, that's what we need. We feed off that. And that's how we feel that strength. I'm telling you, it just expounds. That would be my advice. Believe.
Like,
and then be careful about the things that you say. Just take care in your words. Don't tell somebody that just had their boob chopped off that they're going to get a boob job. It's not okay.
You're getting new boobs. Yeah,
it's not okay. It's two totally different things.
Yeah. Gotcha. John, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, and just so everybody knows, just because it's a great cause. So tomorrow night I'm going to be speaking in Provo at the Covey Center in downtown Provo. It's going to be an event to encourage those who think of suicide. So it's basically an invitation to stay. And I've been thinking a lot about what would I say, how do we help people through those struggles? And one thing I've found over my career is probably the best way is for you to ramp up your light and get to a place where you're filled with hope, you're filled with faith, you're filled with charity. And then rather than try to teach that to them, just be that in their presence.
Yes.
Meaning,
and I want to bring up what Tara says too, when we went to the thing, remember she says 3 things. And I'm sure there's other things, but these 3 things are great. Something to look forward to, something new to try, and true friendships.
Yep.
Right. I
really love those 3 things.
And really, if you think about it, those true friendships, that is someone who's got ramped up their light and then just get around them. That's
how you fight suicide. Yeah. And I know it's prominent right now.
And that makes you a conduit for the spirit too. And it's almost like, I think everybody, if they have an individual need on what will help them want to stay or help them want to fight their cancer or help them want to have hope, even though they're going through a divorce or have lost a child or whatever it may be, just being that light around them, the spirit will tell you what they specifically need, and it may be totally different than what someone else needs. But yeah, I think we become a conduit when we're like that.
I agree.
So anyway, that's all I got to say.
Thanks.
And that I love Syra, you know, and she's become a dear friend. And I am so glad we got her in the hot seat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. She's awesome. I'm glad I got her in there too.
From the hot tub to the hot seat.
I was actually thinking
Welcome.
from the couch to the hot tub to the hot seat.
Okay, the couch was first, yes.
The couch. So anyway,
Just friendshiping, just for FYI. That's
it was all on the up and up. We didn't
Yep,
have
it was
anything
all
crazy
good.
going on.
And I will always be grateful for the hand massage that you
Yes.
gave me
The hand massage.
at the
Hey, that's another way I
whatever
like
thing
to heal.
in Boise. The
At
Boise,
the Boise
Bash. There you go.
Bash. Yes.
It was a Boise Bash extravaganza.
And it was fabulous.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. I'm just going to end with one thing. And this is, well, two things. I'll make it short though. This is just from my experience. And I feel like when people didn't know what to say to me, I almost felt like wanting to say that. Like, tell me, I'm so sorry. I'm not even sure what to say,
Yes.
but I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never been in your shoes, so I'm not sure how I can help. How can I
And I
help?
love you.
Yeah. How can I help you? I want you to know I love
Believe
you, and
in
I will
you.
pray. I think it's okay to just be 100% honest, dude. I don't know.
Yep.
Please give me some instructions and I will do it. And then just be authentic when you offer help. Don't be like, oh, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do? And then like rush off, right? Like that's not really like, be authentic. I don't know what to say. I would love to help. How can I? So that would be my 2 cents on that, because I found that when people came to me with those type of messages, it was easier for me to reach out to them, and it was easier for me to just have that interaction because they were just being honest and they weren't making it awkward, I guess.
And I'll tell you, it makes it easier for us to trust people that say it to us, especially if they're authentic when they say it. Because we feel like we have to put this mask on, and all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, for a second I can take off this mask.
It's like,
it's
what
okay,
can I
I'm
do
gonna
for
cry.
you? Yeah. And then
Yeah.
oh my gosh, they truly do want to do something for me. Can you
I
complete my
think
toenails?
that
Whatever.
it's the energy of it too.
Yeah.
You know, really looking someone in the eye and say, no, I'm serious.
Right.
I want you to call me if you need anything.
Yeah.
Like, I really am there for you.
Or
one thing we
even
learn in
just call
crisis,
them.
when we help people through crisis, you almost got to grab them by the face. We don't do therapy with them anymore. I'm literally telling you what to do, and I'm telling you, you can lean on me.
Yeah.
And, you know, in other words, don't be scared. You know, it's like heart surgery. Don't be scared to touch the heart. You know, sometimes you got to go in there and squeeze it and massage it to keep it alive, you know. And I think that's the thing, because what you're describing is people feel like you're afraid of them, or that you don't know what to say. You know, that doesn't mean you don't take direction from them, that you're not humble, you know. And somebody mentioned they don't think that I'm right about that, but I think not being afraid to really go in there and just say, what can I do to help you somehow?
And if you really mean it, I'm telling you, it is like, I have a hard time really finding somebody that I truly believe. I believe they're sincere, but do they really, really mean it? Like, I want you to come to me, because they don't understand a lot of times what they're asking.
Right.
They're asking for me. My weight is very, very heavy. Very few people can handle what goes on, what I battle on a daily basis. I am in pain 90 to 95% of my life. This is the norm for me. So I know that it's too much for most people. So when I find somebody who truly means it, it means the world to me.
Well, when they're like, call me.
Once you say, Syra, that you need a team of people like that.
Right.
Yes.
So if I go up to somebody and say, I really will be there for you, I'm not saying I'm your only person on your team, you know, I'm adding myself, you know, and
it'll be different every time. It will.
Right.
This person will be able to help you in this moment, and this person will be able to help you in this moment. And you'll know when to go to who.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So just to clarify, I believe absolutely we need to say, call me when you need something, and be authentic. But just to add, it's okay to actually just go and do as well. If they don't call, show up on their doorstep.
Right. And I do agree with Brian.
Whatever. So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I don't think it was wrong. I think it was just 2-part. And so But when you do say, hey, call me, just be authentic, because guess what? Sometimes they do.
Yeah. And I wasn't saying
It's
you
okay
give
to
up
say
that.
no.
You wait for that phone call. I
Right,
think
no.
the reaching out needs to be a repetitive,
Mm-hmm.
you know, hey,
Absolutely.
I haven't heard from you, but I'm still here. And so tell me now, you know.
Exactly.
So I wasn't saying that you just tell them to call you once and then crickets, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because the battle continues. I mean, I beat cancer almost 2 years ago. You know, I beat it.
It can't be a one-shot deal. I agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I just think it's true intent, and then just be active, and just, if you don't know what to do, ask. If you're not
And
sure
it's
what to say,
okay
let them
if
know that.
if you're not ready, or if you can't handle when somebody is coming to you for help, it's okay. As a person coming to you, you need to be okay. You can say no. I'll be okay, because we can't always handle it. We know when we're in weak points in our lives, and you got to be okay with, okay, some people are going to say, no, I can't handle this. And then you listen to the spirit and you try something else.
Right.
Yeah, you might just say, I got a crisis going on in my own life right now. And so, but I might resolve that in a week from now. I might be in a place where I can totally be there for you. And do you have other people you can talk to, you know, and, you know, tell me that that you have other people you can talk to, you know, and you'll have me back, you know. I mean, we have to almost over communicate. I've talked to Tyra about that situation with her employee, and she said, the one thing I wish I'd done is over communicate. Like over reassure, like let them know, you know, I'm going to, we're going to find a way through this together.
The squeaky wheel.
I over communicate.
So,
right.
You know, it's like, let's get this done, and let's follow through and have a heart that's legit, you know, like it's sincere. I want to help you. Let me know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Syra. I'm so excited you came on.